Welcome to Ion Radio. I'm Ken, and today we are going to cover ship maneuvers for Star Trek Into the Unknown by Wizkids. There are two types of maneuvers in the game, engaging warp and engaging impulse. Let's start with warp speed. Now, the first thing to learn about maneuvering at warp speed is faster than light, no left or right. When you are moving at this speed, try to maintain a linear trajectory because any kind of course corrections can fracture the hull. Let's take a closer look at how this is done. Warp maneuvers allow your ships to move great distances and are required to enter or leave systems. An order must be made to engage warp. In our example, the Enterprise is in deep space. Captain Picard is in the captain's chair and gives the order to engage warp. The warp action requires one social, one technical, and one reserve power to engage warp. Picard has the necessary skills, and the player only needs to spend one reserve power to satisfy the action's cost. We then choose the warp factor up to the unit's warp drive stat. For the Enterprise, it is 9. If the unit's engine power stat is lower than the chosen warp factor, either reserve power equal to the difference must be spent, or a lower warp factor chosen. The Enterprise, at green alert 1, is able to make warp factor 9. The ruler is placed alongside the unit, with the starting end aligned to the rearmost corner of the turning slot. The tracking marker is then placed in the rear slot on the base. This is useful if the Enterprise needs to return to its original position. The unit is then placed parallel to the ruler within the maximum distance specified by the warp factor. If this overlaps the base of another ship or is outside the sector, the unit may move until it can fit into the play area and is no longer overlapping the base of any ship. We then check ranges to units, features, or other game components that have abilities or triggers regarding units within a certain range. In this example, there is an anomaly token within 2 inches of the Enterprise. However, it is not revealed until the hazard phase. When traveling at warp speed, if any part of the unit's base overlaps any part of the system boundary, that unit is in the system. We now place a System 1 token on the ship's base. Now that we're familiar with traveling between systems at warp power, we should learn to make course corrections at impulse. So here's some of the basic maneuvers for moving your ship. Impulse can be used for course corrections during prolonged warp maneuvers or to navigate around a solar system. The first basic maneuver is forward impulse. This action on the Enterprise requires one technical skill and one reserve power to engage impulse. The daring first officer has the technical requirement, and the player spends one reserve power to satisfy the action's cost. Once paid for, we can engage at impulse power. The Enterprise is currently at Yellow Alert 1, which has an engine stat of 6 with a turn rating of 1. First, we place the turning tool into either the port or starboard side of the base for a left or right turn, respectively. The central notch should be aligned to the center of the slot. We now have an optional heading adjustment step. Ships can turn either before or after their move, but not both. To adjust the ship's heading, rotate the turning tool up to a number of notches equal to or less than the current impulse turn value. Note, the stem of the tool must rotate toward the aft of the base. It is not necessary to stop on the specific notch. The ruler is then positioned into the groove on the turning tool, and the starting end is flush with the tool. The turning tool is then advanced along the ruler up to a maximum distance allowed by the ship's engine power stat. At Yellow Alert, the Enterprise can move 6. Prior to moving the ship, the tracking marker is placed in the aft slot of the base. The Enterprise is now moved to the position of the turning tool aligned with the center notch. We need to check for overlapping other bases or being outside of the sector and need to adjust accordingly. The ruler is now removed. If the ship did not adjust its heading before the move, another optional opportunity to do so can happen now. The unit must rotate so that the fore end of the base is moved toward the stem of the turning tool. This keeps the consistency of turning left or right. We then check ranges to units, features, or other game components that have abilities or triggers regarding units within a certain range. A come-about impulse maneuver allows the ship to freely spin around its center axis to change its facing without moving forward. The unit is rotated around the center point, staying in the same position on the play area. Before the rotation is complete, we need to make sure that the unit's base does not overlap another ship or land outside of the play area. We finally check ranges to units, features, and other game components that have abilities or triggers regarding units within a certain range, as the ship may be closer after rotation. Now these are the two basic maneuvers from the Learn to Play book. Let's take a look at the two advanced maneuvers at Impulse Power found in the additional rules. The first additional Engage Impulse maneuver is Lateral Impulse. This allows a ship to move sideways. This is done following the same procedure as a forward maneuver, however there are a few exceptions. The turning tool is placed in the fore or aft slot on the ship base, instead of the port or starboard sides. The turning tool stem is turned in the opposite direction of travel. So for a left lateral move, the stem of the turning tool is turned to the right. For a right move, the tool is turned to the left. The tracking maneuver is placed in the slot opposite from the direction of movement. Engine power and turn values are reduced to half, rounded up. Let's take a look at the following example. The Dominion player wants to get a better position with their Jem'Hadar fighter to threaten the Defiant class escort. To do so, the Dominion player engages a lateral impulse maneuver. The Dominion player sets the turning tool into the fore slot on their Jem'Hadar fighter. Because the ship is at an alert status of yellow 1, it has an engine stat of 7 and a turn value of 2, which it halves, rounding up, to 4 and 1 for this lateral impulse maneuver. The Dominion player decides to move the ship 4 inches to its port side. In order to optimize their angle of attack, the Dominion player did not adjust the heading prior to movement. Once the move is completed, the Jem'Hadar player does rotate 1 to the left, putting the Jem'Hadar fighter in a good position to attack either the fore or aft end of the Defiant. Reverse impulse is another advanced maneuver used when the ship wants or needs to move backwards. This is a great move to confuse enemy captains on cloaked Klingon ships waiting to fire. Similar to moving forward, the turning tool is placed in a side slot. However, it is turned toward the fore end of the ship's base. Like lateral movement, engine power and turn values are treated as half the value, rounded up. With the Jem'Hadar fighter now in position to strike at the Defiant, the Federation player decides to limit the options by performing a reverse impulse maneuver. The Defiant is currently at green 2, providing it with an engine stat of 8 and an impulse turn value of 3. For a reverse maneuver, these are treated as half, rounded up to 4 and 2. In an effort to eliminate the rear side of the Defiant from fire, the turning tool is placed on the port side of the Defiant and is rotated the full 2 notches. The ship is then reversed 4 inches, staying close to the anomaly and presenting a better shielded front to the Jem'Hadar fighter. This covers moving your starships throughout the sector in Star Trek Into the Unknown. If you did find this video tutorial helpful, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more Into the Unknown videos. I'm Ken, and you're watching Ion Radio.